Okay, so we're on Lamed Beis, about 10 lines up. Ein Makifin. Ein Makifin Shtei Chaviyos. The Mishnah said, amongst other things, that you're not allowed to bring two barrels next to each other and put the pot on top of it. So Rashi explained that you have a fire. This is like instead of a tripod. So you'll have a fire that but you need some place to put the pot on top. So you take two barrels and bring them close to each other, leave a little space, and put the pot on top. So it says you're not allowed to. The Mishnah didn't explain why. So the Gemara starts off thinking that has nothing to do with the pot on top, just as considered some kind of a binyan that you're building something. The fact that you put two walls, two barrels, that's something of a binyan. That's what the Gemara thinks. On Rav Nachman, so Rav Nachman, something else. He wasn't talking about the Mishnah. He said that if you have stones that you want to use as a toilet seat, so the Rashi says it's in the field and you don't have the regular accessories, so you take two stones and you make the seat out of that, and you could use it as a seat. So it says you're allowed to put them up on Yontif. It's not talking about muktzah of the stones. The stones are not muktzah for some reason, but just the fact that you're setting it up, it says it's permissible. It says Yontif, I think Shabbos also. If it wouldn't be, I don't see if there's Yontif and Shabbos in the whole sugi over here. The issue of building. So Rav Nachman said you're allowed to. And the Gemara thinks it's against our Mishnah. He says you're not allowed to put two barrels next to each other to put the pot on top. So too, you shouldn't be able to put the two stones next to each other. The Gemara doesn't realize that this issue is only because of the pot on top. It's only a problem in our Mishnah because you put the pot on top of the two barrels, and that's the problem because it's an oil. But without the top, there's no problem. So two stones, you're just putting the two stones next to each other, that's not a problem. But Amalei Rabba Zuta L'Ravash. Which is not also some kind of a stone stage or seat that's not kavua. And the Gemara is asking, he's thinking you're allowed to make any kind of a binyan ara, any kind of a temporary binyan, you're allowed to make, as long as you don't make the roof on top of it. That's not true. It's also Rabbanan. Amalei, it's true. It's also Rabbanan. Amalei hasn't binyan keva asher Torah, binyan ara also Torah. Because Rabbanan al binyan ara mishum binyan keva. That with the rice, it's only us if you make a permanent structure. But Rabbanan is us even if you make a temporary structure. So you're right, that it's that's a temporary structure. It's not also Rabbanan. But over here, by the basic kisei, there's a special head there. Because because of the human dignity, so they permitted something which would usually be awesome Rabbanan. That's the end of the sugya, this first sugya, and it comes out that our Mishnah, that even though it seems that even though our Mishnah is also only arai, it's not a permanent structure. You're just taking two barrels to put the pot on top. But since there's an ohel, so then we don't permit it. Even if it would not have an ohel, it would be awesome Rabbanan. But for human dignity, we would permit it. So that's the end of the sugya, that there is Isra Rabbanan to make an ohel arai. We don't permit to make the ohel. It seems for Simchas Yontif maybe we should have been matir, but also we're not matir this kind of a ohel that has a top on top, something on top. So that's more chomer. We're not matir it even for Yontif. If it doesn't have walls, it also will be asam rabbanan, but that's what we're going to be matir for covered abrios. So after the Gemara, we found out that the Mishnah's issue is only when it has a ohel on top. The kedera is the problem that's considered the ohel. The bottom line, Amar Yehuda, I'm a durta milmala lamata shari, milmata lamala asi. Rashi explains that it's a kind of a bonfire and a pyre that you're building up the logs, and Rashi explains that you make two and two. It seems that you build up the walls and then you put something on top of it. So on Yontif, you're allowed to make a fire, but we'll see how you make the fire exactly, but no problem to burning the logs. But the problem is that you're building. It's like some kind of a build structure. The fact that you have the walls of this pyre and then you have the roof on top of it, you put logs on top, so it's some kind of a build structure. And it says you have to do a shinoi. So the same way the Mishnah said that there's a problem making the two barrels with the pot on top because it's a kind of a structure, even though it's arai, but you have to do it. So the Mishnah said don't do it. But here it says there's also a way to do it if you do a shinoi. And the way to do it is to do the opposite order. So milmala lamata. Sure, you can do it the opposite way. That usually how would you do it? You build the walls up of the logs, and then you put something on top, the logs on top, the planks on top, and that's how you apply it that you're going to make the fire with. But if you do it the regular way, it's going to be usher. The mata lamal is usher because that's the regular way of building it. So somebody should hold the top layer and then build up the walls afterwards. So since you're doing a shinui to do the opposite order of how usually we'll build this fire, then it's permissible. So in our mission also, we're going to see right away, the next page, It's going to say in our Mishnah also you can do it as long as you do the opposite order. V'chein beisa, v'chein kedek. Sorry. V'chein beisa, v'chein kedera, v'chein pori, v'chein chavisa. Another 4 examples. The second example is kedera is going to be our Mishnah, that you have a pot on top of 2 barrels. Also, if you put the pot first and then you bring the barrels under it, that's permissible. The first example, Beis says eggs. So Rashi seems to say also you have some kind of a grate that you're putting the eggs on top to roast. So again, you can have some kind of walls over there, and the egg is going to be the thing that's considered the ohel. Even though all these cases you're not making an ohel, you're not thinking of ohel at all. But the fact that you have the 2 sides, and also you want the airspace that Mepharshim explained, that you do need the airspace between the 2 sides. So that's considered somewhat of an ohel when you make the covering on top. So if you have the sideboards, the grill, whatever, and you put the egg, the stand on top of it, or the pot that you put on top of 2 barrels, or v'chein puria. Rashi says that a bed that you put together, so if you have the sideboards and the legs, and you have the what would you call it, the mattress, or Rashi calls it the leather, whatever the leather springs, whatever you're gonna have. So the regular way you're gonna do it is first to make the legs, and then to put the bed itself, the leather, right? But so don't do it in that way. If you're gonna put it back together, so do it the opposite order. First, somebody should hold the leather, and then other people should connect it to the sideboards, and then put the legs. Do it in opposite order. So here Rashi says if you have barrels that are piled up, also there's a question of oil. I don't see over here in this last case why you want to have the airspace in between. Before we had all these cases that there's an airspace in between, like the case of the pyre or the eggs or the pot or the bed. This case I don't know about the chavisa. You don't care about any kind of space in between the 2 barrels. So what's the difference if you have a 3rd barrel on top? But here it says also you have to do it in opposite order, or else it shouldn't be like you're building up an ohel. So what was this last Gemara? 2 lines. It said that even when we're saying this usher to make such kind of a ohel arai, but if you make a shina by doing it the opposite order, so then it's permissible. It should really be two dots over here. There's usually we have 2 dots that are superfluous. Here we're missing a couple of 2 dots. At the end of the first line should be 2 dots. That's the end of the Gemara that we just finished. And now the second line is a quotation from the Mishnah, and it should usually have 2 dots. That's a quote from the Mishnah. The Mishnah said you're not allowed to support a pot with a chip of wood and also a door. So the first part of the halacha, we were told to read the pshat in the Mishnah is that you can't use the bikas. The bikas is a chip of wood which is designated for fuel. It was expected to be putting into the fire, and now you decide you need a chip of wood in order to support a unbalanced pot, so you're not allowed to. And it goes back to the same yesod that we're going to see soon in the 4th line, 5th line. It's going to say that the wood, since it was designated for a fire, you're not allowed to use it for anything else. It has something to do with muktzah, and Rashi is going to tell us who we don't pass like that, because we pass like Rav Shimon that doesn't know of these muktzah. Since it's permissible to use it for one thing, you could use it for something else. But based on this halacha, the Mishnah holds, jump to the 5th line, that it says, Ein lo nitnu eitzim elo lasaka. We'll see that in a second, that wood is only designated for fuel, not for other things, on Yontif. Of course, on Shabbos is not designated for anything, but on Yontif, the wood is designated for fuel, not for anything else. So therefore, if you had this chip of wood, which was not designated as a support for the pot, so you're not allowed to use it on Shabbos and Yontif. You can't decide, no, I need a piece of wood, I'll use it for this. No, it's only designated for firewood. And the Mishnah says the word v'chein b'delas. Rashi told us in the Mishnah that the word seems to say that you're not allowed to support the pot with a door. Just like it says you're not allowed to support the door with a bikas, with a chip of wood. You also can't support the pot with a door. So the Gemara says that there's a door, using a door to support a pot. It's not going on the thing which you're using to support. It's talking about the thing which is being supported. It's another example of the kedera. You're not allowed to support a pot with a chip of wood, and you're not allowed to support a door with a chip of wood, like a door stopper. You have a chip of wood that you want to use for a door stopper, so you go to your wood shed where you had chips of wood, and you want to use it as a door stopper, you can't, because the wood is muktzah. On Shabbos, surely it's muktzah. But even on Yontif, that is designated for firewood, this Mishnah holds that it's only designated for firewood, and you can't use it for anything else. And right, as the Gemara says right away, Tanur Rabbanan, if you want to, you can take out these 2 dots. It's still in the middle of the sugya. Tanur Rabbanan ain't some place like there, bekas, which is out b'chein hadelas. Mamash Mishnah. Plus, it also changed the base to a hay over here. This is what we just did a second ago. The Gemara changed it. The Brisa says so. It's like a Tanya Namiyachi. The Brisa says that the word bidela should be hadelas. And here the Brisa explains the fish. This is the reason we were saying before. Since the wood is only designated for fuel, you're not allowed to use it for something else. And Rav Shimon Matir. Rav Shimon holds you are allowed to. and that this Brisa told us 3 points of information. First of all, change the base to a hey, Bechin Hadalas. Also told us the reason. The reason is not to make some Asaka. And the third thing it tells us is a Shimon argues as it is mutter. Rashi learns that this machlokes of Yudah of Shimon, Tanakama of Shimon is a regular machlokes about muktzah. The same way you find always if Shimon doesn't know the muktzah, he doesn't know this muktzah either. That since on Yom Tov you are allowed to use it for fuel, so okay, it's for use of fuel. You want to use it for something else? Use it for something else now. It doesn't make a difference which permitted use you're going to use. Rabbi Yehuda is the one who says muktzah, and he says that the Yom Tov is only designated for fuel. The truth is, Rabbi Yehuda himself usually holds that something which is permitted for one use, you're not used for something else. But sometimes you do see that he prohibits it, like by the Nevela, which died on Yom Tov, that even though Yom Tov came in, it was only to be used as human food. Now that it died, so he holds you can't use it for animal food. So you do find that Yehuda holds sometimes that it's designated for one thing, you don't have in mind for anything else. So he holds that the wood on Yom Tov is all designated for firewood unless you had specific intention before that. And the Rashi is going to go throughout the sugya, a very interesting Rashi, that he says, come out, the whole page is not going to be halacha, even though the Gemara talks very much as if it is halacha. He says we pass like Reb Shimon and many halachas in this page that he's going to pass him the whole thing. We don't hold up. According to Rashi, we don't hold up all these halachas because he's going to say that according to Reb Shimon there's no muktzah, like it says Reb Shimon Matir, and therefore it says also the first halachas also he's going to pass him that all these things about making these ohalim, he's going to say it's called Davar Shem B'Skavan and it's mutter, and he's also going to say you pass like Rabbi Yehuda Machshir Yochel Nefesh is mutter. So Rashi says the whole page is not halacha. Taishas argues three times. Taishas argues on Rashi and says no, they do pass like all these halachas. So this is a question already for the halacha class. But as far as the Gemara, Rashi learns that these Gemaras are not halacha. So if you want to, again, 2 dots come over here. The Gemara left out a lot of 2 dots over here. This is a new sugya, and it's going back to the Mishnah. Ve'en manhigin. This is a quotation from the Mishnah, and it's a piska that the Gemara brings down. Ve'en manhigin asabem of a makal v'yom tov Reb Shimon Matir. All that was the quotation to the Mishnah. The last thing the Mishnah said was that you're not allowed to lead an animal with a stick on Yom Tov. Reb Shimon permits it, and we don't know the reason. What's it all about? So Rashi told us that the Gemara's the first impression is going to be that's also you're going to the woodshed and taking a piece of wood and using it as a stick. And the problem is, as we said before, that the stick is only designated for firewood, and you're not allowed to use it for something else. Just like we said, you're not allowed to use it for supporting a pot and the door. You also can't use it for using it as a prodder to get the animal to go. And Reb Shimon says you may, and it sounds like he doesn't know the muktzah. It sounds like his father that said a second ago, Reb Shimon Matir, 2 lines ago. Reb Shimon Matir, so Reb Shimon also Matir. That's the more things. Name of Reb Shimon Kapuas Fiole. It's less than muktzah. It sounds like Reb Shimon holds like his father Reb Shimon. That's Reb Shimon Bar-Yochai, and the son of Reb Shimon. That just like Reb Shimon said that there's no problem of the wood which was designated for firewood, you can use it for other permissible purposes. So too. Rabbi Reb Shimon says you could go to the woodshed and take something for a prodder. What's the problem? Because he holds like Reb Shimon. But the Gemara says no, that's one pshat in the Mishnah. No, that's not the pshat. This Mishnah about leading the animal with a stick has nothing to do with muktzah. It's not that you're going to the woodshed to take a stick of wood which was designated for fuel and now you're going to use it for leading the animal. No, you have a regular official prodding stick and still it's usher. And what's the isser? A new isser, that it shouldn't look like you're going to the marketplace. The word chinga, Rashi says, means like the word chinga, like Rashi says chug, that it's a circle, place where people go and razor around, and that's like in the shuk. Right, like the Softim Bashuk, the place where people dray around from booth to booth. So if you're taking the animal with a prodder, it looks like you're going for a long distance. You're going to the shuk, and that is a zilzul for Yom Tov. So that's nothing to do with muktzah. And on that, Reb Shimon holds that it's not a problem, and we're going to pass like the Tanakam over here that there is such a problem of man doesn't lechinga. So nothing to do with muktzah. The Gemara says you might have thought that's the pshat, but the Gemara says no, not necessarily. It could be that it's an uisser that it shouldn't look too weekdayish. Next Gemara, Chizra. Chizra, Rashi says, is a kind of a stick, which is a pointy stick. Agav, the Gemara says it in Shabbos when a person bows in Shemon Esrei, in Brachas, Gemara in Brachas, when a person bows, he should bow like a Chizra. So Rashi says it's a branch, and that Rashi talks about that you bow in one movement, not in 2 movements, that you bow your head and your waist in one movement. Taisus points out that over there, Chizra is a kind of a what shape is that called? Like a bent over shape. It's kind of a branch that bends over, and that's the Shadon Shemon Esrei, that a person is supposed to bend both his waist and his head. And in our Gemara, we just want to point out something which is pointy. It has a thorn or something pointy, Rashi says. And the issue is you want to use the stick as a spit. For a spit, you need something pointy. You're able to stick it into the meat, whatever. You want to use it to roast your meat on Yantif. Are you allowed to use it? So it was not designated before Yantif. It was designated fine. That's a spit. That's okay. But he wants to take a stick that has a point, and he wants to use it as a spit. May you? If Nachman Nasser of Sheish Shari, Machlokis, if you're allowed to use it or not. And the Gemara explains, if it's a moist stick that's not roy to use as firewood, then surely it's assur because it's not roy for anything. It wasn't designated before. It's a plain stick, so it's a muksa for everybody. Keep pligi be a veshta. But the question will be a dry stick. That means it is roy to be used as fuel. The one who says that it's assur is because it's designated for fuel, and that's all. It's not designated for a spit. It's designated for fuel. So therefore, you're not allowed to use it. And again, this is all going according to the Madam Rabbi Yehuda that says Rashi is going to interject that we pass like a Shimon, and the whole Gemara doesn't not going to be lalacha because we're allowed to use wood according to Rabbi Shimon even for other purposes. But the whole Gemara is going all these Amorim, all of Nachman, Rav Sheshes, everyone's all going according to Rabbi Yehuda that says you're not allowed to use wood only for fuel, and therefore he says even though it's a dried stick and it's usable for fuel, but that's it, for fuel only and not for other things. But the one who says it's permissible is because that's also called for fuel. What's the difference if I'm going to use it as fuel and roast in its coal? That's kachalta, or to use it to roast. I mean, since it's also for the purpose of roasting, what's the difference if it's going to be the stick which is in the fire on the bottom, or it's the stick which is holding onto the meat in order to use it as a spit? That's also, it's designated for that purpose. It's designated for roasting. I don't care if it's going to be the coal or it's going to be the spit. So therefore, that's why he says that it's mutter. Even if you hold on to it's not dafka the fuel, it also could be for anything you need to get the fire. Others have a different version of this machlokis. Everybody would agree that if it's dry, as far as we just said, that there's no difference if it's using it as a coal or using it as a spit. That's all included in the designation that it was made for roasting. But there is going to be somebody who holds that as mutter, even if it's moist stick and it's not usable as fuel. The one who says it's us is because it's not fit for burning, because it's moist. You can't throw a moist stick into a fire. Nothing's going to happen. You don't use that. So therefore it's us for everything. But the one who says that's permissible is because he says that it is fit for a fire. It depends. A small fire, you're right. The moist stick is not going to do anything for you. But if you put it into a very big fire, so then the big fire is able to dry it out, and then it becomes a fuel also. So since it is fit in some cases, in some scenarios, it will be usable as fuel, so therefore it's considered not muktzah, and you're allowed to use it also as a spit. The halacha is going to be, according to Rashi, this is not going to be halacha, but according to the Gemara, no matter which lashon we learn, who's the mach, who's the mekel, but the one who's dried out is permissible, as we said, because mali lislas bo, mali lislas b'kachalto. But retifta asa, because we don't say since it's roy for a big fire, a regular fire, you don't use a moist stick as a fuel, so therefore it's asa. Rashi again says that even though the Gemara says hilchasa, it's not hilchasa, because we hold that we don't say this thing of lenitu eitzim elo lasaka. It's true, Yabishta will be mutter because not without the fancy svar of the Gemara, just that you're allowed to use it for fuel. You can use it for anything. The Gemara says no, you only use it for fuel, and this is also considered fuel. What's the difference if it's the spit or it's the coal? But Rashi will say it's mutter legamri because there's no mukta on sticks. It could be you'll be masking that a betifta that's not roy if anything. It's just that only it wasn't designated for a spit, so it's just a regular stick on the street. He also will be masking that it's mukta. New Gemara, also similar to our sugi still now. Isha losikana is l'dir eitzim l'tom hen ud. A woman should not go into the woodshed to take a ud. The ud is a poker, a stoker, a stick that you use in order to adjust the coals in the fire, not a spit. You don't put the meat onto it, but you stir the coals. So you can't take a piece of wood from the woodshed, which again, the wood is designated for fire for fuel, and wood is not. So here the Gemara seems to say a difference between the spit and before the Gemara said that the spit and coals is all the same maybe, because it's also helping the fuel. But here the fact of the stoker, that this poking stick, the Gemara doesn't seem it's the same thing, and therefore he says don't go in to take a stick which is designated for wood, for fire, for fuel, and use it as a stoker. Taisa says that here the problem is, Rabbi Chananel says the issue is here is that you're making that you have to shape it a little bit. You have to use it. You have to carve it out or something in order to make it into a kli, which could be used as this stoker. That's the reason why it's asa. So maybe we do pass like it, maybe we don't pass like it. Isha. They used to be the ones that in charge of the fire. You're right. A man also, but the woman would be the one who would go to the woodshed and take and she'd be doing it. The man would go chopping the wood over there, and the woman is the one who's taking the sticks to throw into the fire. And here, she also needs something to stoke the fire. Another halacha, the opposite. You have already a poker stick, and it broke, and now you want to use it for fuel. The first case was you want to take a fuel stick, a stick which is designated for wood, and now you want to use it for a poker. And this other case, it was a poker, now it broke, and you want to use it for fuel. So this goes back to the same machlokas of Yehuda of Shimon. This was opening. This was very beferish. The feast of Masikim became. This is Abuda's words that says you're allowed to make a fire out of a kli. Means we said, example, take a chair and throw it into the fire because it's a non-muktzah, and you're allowed to throw it into the fire. But you can't take a shivur kelim. If the chair broke on Yantif, so now it becomes muktzah, because when Yantif came in, it was a usable thing, and now it became a shivur kelim, which also on Yantif it's mutter, because on Yantif you're allowed to use fuel, but it wasn't only for fuel. Here we see Abuda holds that sometimes, even though it's designated for one permissible use, you can't use it for a different permissible use. And this is Rabbi Yehuda, he said so, and Rabbi holds like him, and therefore he says, you can't use it for fuel on Yantif. The more is a kasha because we don't think that Rabbi holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Here comes out that Rabbi holds like Rabbi Yehuda of Muktzah. The name of the Rabbi Yehuda Sfirle. You mean to say that Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rabbi holds like Rabbi Yehuda? This like Muktzah. We have a story that Rabbi didn't say so. Rabbi told his servant, roast for me a goose on Yantif and throw its intestines to the cat. So this was human food. The goose was all made to be human food, like he said, roasted for me. But then he decided that a piece of it should go to the cat. And that's Allah Rav Yehuda holds that you're not allowed to change the designation on Yantif. Like I said before a couple of times, there's an animal that died on Yantif. When Yantif came in, it was a live animal, all made to be slaughtered and used for human consumption, and then the animal died, and you only can give it to the dogs now. Rav Yehuda says you can't, only if it was in Snapple Meir of Shabbos. We have Yantif. So here, if Rabbi says that you could give the intestines to the cat, it sounds like it was like Rav Shimon, that since before was human food and now it's animal food, it's all okay. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, you shouldn't be able to. If Rabbi was like Rabbi Yehuda, then he shouldn't have permitted to give the name Ayim to the cat. The Gemara answers, since it spoils, so from yesterday he already has his mind on it. So Rashi says the case was that Rabbi knew, it seems that they usually would eat the intestines, the kishka of the goose, but he had enough meat in the goose alone, and he knew he's not going to be eating it. If anything, he'll save it for Ishruchag, but then it doesn't stay so long. Misruchi, it's going to get spoiled, Rashi says, and therefore from every yontif he knew that this is going to be for the cat. So again, even though the whole goose as a whole was only for human food, but that intestine was already only for every yontif to be given for the animal food, therefore it's permissible even according to Rabbi. That's the end of the sugya. And Rashi says the old sugya we don't pass on like, came out everything, every only case of the chinga maybe, going on the marketplace with a stick, maybe that's the one that's also, but everything else, Rashi says, and just to point out the Rashi here, Hilchasa, Rashi says, Hilchasa, right about 5 lines before it spreads, Hilchasa, Aliba, demand the Islam Muksa Ikva. This, when the Gemara says Hilchasa, because this Gemara happens to hold like Rabbi Yehuda, Avlanan, Rav Shimon's Fiolon, Ben Muksa, Ben Shem Beskavin, and also like Rabbi Yehuda, Ben Machshir Nefesh. Rashi says that there are 3 things we pass on against our Gemara. We don't hold the Muksa, like Rav Shimon, and also Rav Shem Beskavin is mutter, and also Rabbi Yehuda, Machshir Nefesh is mutter, and therefore Kulu Sharu. Chizra, Smichas Kedera, Sakafas Chavios, the Medorta, Kedera, and all the Amoram here, they all hold like against what we pass in. The Cholam Amoram Shasu Aselu, the Malam Tamid the Rav, Hayu, Havu, the Rasu Lakav Yehuda, the Muksa, Kaman Kav Shimon. So Rashi takes the whole Gemara and says we don't pass like all these Gemaras, takes Zags and all these Rashis that we do. So Allah and myself, we have to wait to find out where we argue. Rashi learns all these Gemaras are going according to opinions that we don't pass on. Next Mishnah, Veleza Omer. Note a lot of them cases Mishalafana, the Chos says Lachsas Boshinav, Omagave min Achatsa Madlik, Shekol Mash Bachatsa Muchanum. So the issue is the person, he's going in his house, in his Chatsa, and he needs a toothpick. Nowadays we go to the cabinet, take out an official toothpick, very beautiful. But in those days they would bend down to the floor and take some kind of twig or whatever it is, and showing you have a toothpick. So the question is, then a yantif, is it muksa? Was it designated for that? It was just a piece of dirt on the floor, so it's not, it's muksa. So Beleza says that everything on the floor a person has in mind he wants to use. So he's allowed to take a case of mishalafanav, a toothpick from any kind of wood that's in front of him, to use lachas boshina, to use as a toothpick. And also he could collect all these twigs in his chatzar and use it for fuel, because everything in the chatzar is mukhan. Till now we spoke about woods what kind of wood is there in the field, whatever. But if something in the chutzner, everything in this courtyard, he has in mind, I want to use it either for a toothpick or also for fuel, and that's all designated by default as designated in its mutter. And Rashi says that even though it says here Mishal Fanav, the case of Mishal Fanav, Rashi says that also mutter from the chutzner. Mishal Fanav, Rashi says, means in the house, and the chutzner says in the chutzner. So Rashi says that even though Abelazar says the toothpick from in front of him, he really means that you're allowed to take the toothpick from the chutzner. Everything in the chutzner, in the house, everything is designated, all the twigs and small pieces of wood are all designated for whatever you want for. But the Chachamim say two machlokisin. The Chachamim omrim megabe Mishal Fanav u'mavlik. That two chumras. First of all, no toothpicks, only for fuel. And again, it's going to be because there's a person doesn't have in mind for the toothpick, he only has in mind for the fuel. And also only Mishal Fanav, not in the chutzner. So Rashi says that the things in the chutzner, the pieces of twigs in the chutzner are not, the point of Chachamim are not designated. He doesn't have such a kind of a default intention, but only in the house. Whatever's in the house, he does have in mind that should be used for fire, but not the ones that are on the chutzner. So two machlokim going on. One is that Rabbi Elazar holds even toothpick, even from the chutzner. And Rabbanan say no toothpicks, and only from the house, and even in the house, only for fuel and not for a toothpick. Again, nowadays, all this doesn't apply. We don't have in this scenario. We have ceramic floors, and you don't make fires anyway, and toothpicks you're not going to take from the floor probably. But I guess nowadays, surely a person does not have in mind that anything on the floor is going to be for a toothpick. So all these things are muktzah nowadays. Now comes a new Mishnah that really could be like a mamish, a new Mishnah altogether, no shaykhs at all.
So you can't pick up anything from the floor.
Right, it's muktzah. I mean, if you have a toothpick on the floor, toothpicks, I fell to the floor, it's not muktzah. But a piece of, you look on the floor, so it's muktzah, like same thing, earth and stones, so a piece of wood also, and even on Yom Tov, we don't have mind for all these things. So the world changed. The halacha didn't change, but the world changed, and the way that halacha changes that in those days, people had in mind that they need fuel for fire. So what do? You go to the floor and you find some twigs. Well, we don't do that. So any kind of twig on the floor is always going to be muktzah. If you need a toothpick, a tissue is not muktzah. A tissue is not muktzah. Right. So now you want to pick up something, then it's going to be tiltum anatzad. That's going to be, what's that? A glove. So it has to be tiltum anatzad. If you're gonna take something that's muktzah, so then it's a question of tiltum anatzad. You can take a broom into a dustbin. This is called tiltum anatzad. Let's start over on mutter. But the thing is muktzah. Here we're saying that it's not muktzah because they had in mind to use these things for use for a toothpick. They would pick it up and use it, or for wood, for fuel. But nowadays this doesn't apply. The next Mishnah is the famous Mishnah everybody knows, but we never had it yet. That you're not allowed to. Yes,
just
please.
one question. We find the Mishnah. Sorry, part that you're allowed to clean up crumbs. You're allowed to machab the table. Floors maybe not because mashal bumais in those days. But on the table you could pick up, put the crumbs together.
So what will be the problem? What's the problem with the crumbs?
I'm saying, let's say the crumbs fall on the floor.
No, so crumbs is food. So the question, if it's food, then it's not muktzah. If the Gemara talks about that, in those days the crumbs were animal food.
Yes.
And maybe nowadays also. I don't know what we use for animal food. But even if it's not destined anymore to use for people, it could be on the table. People do pick up things on the table as long as on the table is food, I would think. But once it goes on the floor, maybe it's not already, now it's not going to be used for food anymore. Maybe you have to consider it if it's not an edible piece. If it's a chashva piece, a kazayis falls on the floor, you pick it up and we can still eat it on our floors. But if it will be mamish crumbs that you're not going to be able, that wouldn't be edible anymore, then it might be considered muktzah nowadays. Now, once it's on the floor already. In those days, if it would be considered animal food, it wouldn't be muktzah. Nowadays, I don't know if it's animal food anymore.
You sweep up on the
Yeah,
floor.
sweeping is mutter, even if it's dust, even if it's things that are muktzah, because it's tiltum outside, it's mutter. So you're using a broom, which is permissible, and it's tiltum outside. I'm not touching the muktzah; it's indirect, and I'm doing it not because I want the muktzah, because I don't want the muktzah here. I don't want it here. The tiltum outside, the mutter, you're allowed to sweep up muktzah. So now comes the famous Mishnah that we didn't have inside, but here's going to say you're not allowed to create a new fire. You said you're allowed to burn the whole time, but you have to have a fire which is already existing, and you can't make a new fire. So nowadays we would say you can't light a match, but they didn't have matches in those days. So the Mishnah has other examples of how to create a new fire. Very interesting, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 examples of how to make a new fire. So the case of the ra'afim, something out the word ra'afim means tiles. We'll see in a second that word. But you can't, sticks and stones. That's how you drop sticks and stones together. That's how you make a new fire. Then it says also offer. Rashi says there are some places where they have some kind of earth that when you dig, also it creates a fire. I guess there's also going to be some kind of a friction. Maybe it's a hard earth, hardened earth. So also, if you could make a fire out of that, it's going to be something of rubbing together probably. And of him, if it means tiles, obviously you rub tiles together and these shingles in a way that also can make a fire. The last one is very interesting. How do you make a fire out of water? So Rashi says that it's a magnifying glass. So instead of magnifying glass, they had water. If you put glass with water on top of it, it's going to act like a magnifying glass, and it's going to concentrate the rays of the sun's rays. And if you concentrate it onto something which is flammable, it's going to become fire. So fascinating thing that the Mishnah talks about taking out fire from water and how he's supposed to figure out what that means. Rashi says that he heard from somebody that who does he say? He got it from somebody that explained that it's a magnifying glass. It doesn't say magnifying, but he says he got it. Some say from Sefer Yetzirah. Rashi, one line up from the bottom, he says this shot about a magnifying glass. It doesn't. A magnifying glass in those days had to be not because of the way the glass was shaped, but because you put water on top of it, and that caused the concave or the shape. But Rashi ends off, Lombardi, and on the bottom it says someplace, I don't see the Nagam over here, but they say that it's the Sefer Yetzirah maybe.
Yeah, I have it certainly in the pure Sefer Yetzirah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in our yeah. Okay. He was the one who wrote Pirush and Sefer Yetzirah. Okay. So this is okay, but this is a Pirush on Sefer Yetzirah. It probably is also not. It's not the worst Mavam Avinu. Probably is just going to mean that the Yisodas are the Kabbalah. But the main thing we would say in our updated translation, we would say you're not allowed to take fire out of matches. You can't make a new fire. You have to have a fire which is already there. Then you're allowed to transfer it and make it bigger, but you can't create a new fire with a spark, whatever we do nowadays. Okay, that's the new halacha, and this is where it says it. And we have to find out why not. What's the problem? And the last thing is, when you can't heat up rough, and rough is like shingles, tiles, that you heat it up and then it becomes hot, and then you'd be able to roast on top of it. They make that the heating element kind of thing. Not like before. Before you had fire and you had grill, whatever, and you had to make something separating either a piece of cheres or paper in order that it shouldn't burn. There wasn't the heating element. But this is the case that you want to malaben, you want to make white hot, you want to make the tile, this roughen, this tile shingle should become heated up, and you'll be able to roast on it, put a piece of fish on it or egg, crack an egg on it, it's going to become a fried egg. So you're not allowed to do that. And the Gemara is going to talk about why not. What's wrong with that's what's wrong. You're allowed to make a fire, you're allowed to make heated, you're allowed to roast. What's the problem? So the Gemara is going to talk about these things. Back to the beginning, it spoke about all of these kesamim, these kind of twigs over here, and it says how you're allowed to use it to use as a toothpick. So the Gemara is going to go on to that subject. Rav Yehuda. Let me turn the page. Lamed Gimel, Lamed Beis. Ochlei behema. Ochlei behema ain't ben mishum tikkun kli. Animal food, there's no issue of tikkun kli. Even if you take animal food and carve out something out of it, for instance, a toothpick, since it's animal food, so it's not called a kli. So even lachatchili, you'd be allowed to take animal food, surely human food. Even animal food, you're allowed to carve out to make a kli out of it. It's not called tikkun kli. No issue of tikkun kli on something which is edible. Tomorrow's the kasha. Eisvei Rav Kana Rav Yehuda. Metalta nasiv yisam l'riach behen, v'lahanit behen l'chola, u'mol lo m'riach bo, v'lo yikatmenu l'riach bo, v'mkot m'pota v'laseh. I'm sorry for reading so much. Lachsas bo shinav lo yikatmenu v'mkot m'chayiv chatas. That's all the brisa. And this brisa is going to have a kasha on the original statement of Rav Yehuda. It says here, first of all, you're allowed to move the summon, I'll say the summon, things that are fit for smelling. It's not muktzah, it's fit for smelling, so it's not muktzah, you're allowed to move it. And also, a lot of fan l'chol, if you want to fan a sick person with it, also you could use that, no problem. You're also allowed to rub it between your fingers in order to get out the fragrance. You also could take this summon and rub it in a way that the fragrance will come out. Yeah, before the more quoted this, that it's mutter because the reich is already there. You're not molded reich because the reich is already inside. You're just bringing it out. So it's not called that you're molded reich. Like to menu, but don't cut it. You're allowed to rub it between your fingers, but don't cut it. You want to cut a piece, and then the place where the cut is, it smells. Don't do that. Don't make a cut. Why not? Because in the next words we're going to see soon, if you did it, it's only Asam Rabbanan. It's not Chayiv, it's Asir Rabbanan. But the problem is, if you're going to cut this piece of wood in order to make a toothpick out of it, then don't do it, and that's even Chayiv Chatas. Like the menu, if you're going to take this piece of the summon and cut it into a toothpick, that's going to even be Chayiv Chatas. You made it clean. And the most kasha, Rashi says the most kasha is based on that. I'd say for some, these spices, whatever these fragrant smelling wood, is sometimes animal food. And if you use that animal food is not considered a kli, even lachatchila, you'd be allowed to carve animal food into a toothpick. Here it says that it's chayv chatas even. So that was the kasha Rav Kana asked Rav Yehuda. Amalei, Rav Yehuda said to Rav Kana, he's saying you seem to have a great kasha. I said it's mutter, and you bring me a kasha that is chayv chatas. Means it would have even been a kasha on me if it would have been asamir rabbanan. I said it's permissible, and if you would have found some place where it says asamir rabbanan, it also would have been a nice kasha. But you're bringing like a bomb kasha against me that it's even chayv chatas. I'm saying it's permissible, and the Brisa says that's chayv chatas. So this kasha deserves an answer. Ella kitan yahi b'kashin. Over there, it's talking about a hard kind of asay b'samim, which is not fit for animal food. Not every b'samim is fit for animal food. So you thought that when it says asay b'samim, it means all kinds of animal food. No, there's some hard ones that like wood, that is not fit for animal food, and that's why it's chayv chatas, because it's not fit for animal food. But animal food would be mutter to carve into a toothpick. The Gemara says kasha doesn't make sense. Kasha named the it says in the Brisa that this asay b'samim you're allowed to rub between your fingers in order to bring out the fragrance. That means something soft. If you have a stick and you rub between your fingers, nothing's going to happen. So it's talking about something which is soft, and it says on that if you're going to carve it into a toothpick, it's going to be chayv chatas. So your pshat doesn't make sense. You can't say it's talking about hard. It's talking about soft. If it's hard stick, is it possible to rub between your fingers to bring out the smell? So the Gemara says, you're right, we have to make edit it a little bit. There's some words missing. You should learn like this. First, it's talking about taka soft atzei b'samim, and that's why it says mololo. Mololo, to rub between your fingers is only possible if it's soft, and that says it's permissible. And over there it says also stick in the ones that are soft, you're even allowed to break off a piece. Not only, of course, whenever we say break off a piece, it doesn't mean that it's still attached to the ground. Of course, it's already separated from the ground, but you can take this, whatever, hadas, whatever it might be, and break off a piece, and the smell will come out. Mint leaves, whatever you want to have, these kind of soft things, you'd be allowed to even take a piece off and smell it. And the reason why it's mutter is because there's no problem at all making a kli. And even if you make a kli out of it, it's mutter. Like I said, things that are machal behema, like a soft kind of asay b'samim, you're even allowed to make a kli out of it. So everything's mutter, you're allowed to do whatever you want. But the Brisa says, "B'medram more b'rakin." There's only talking about soft. That it's machal behema. Avo b'kashin, if it's hard, then it's not machal behema anymore because it's hard. The animals can't eat this hard stuff. So now, lo yiktem menu, don't cut it, even in a way that you're only doing it avriach bo. Because you didn't make it clear, that's intended to smell it. But if you did it in order to make a toothpick out of it, then it's chayv chatas. So what did he finish? So the review this formula, his cloud still stays true. There's something which is roy from machal behema is mutter to do whatever you want. It's machal behema, so therefore it's no it's going to make it clear. The Brisa that says that you're not allowed to talk about when it's not roy machal behema, it's a hard stick, and then you're not allowed to even cut it in order to smell it, because you might cut it in order to make a kli out of it, and making a kli would be asa b'deraisa. But something which is soft and machal behema, then it's mutter to do whatever you want. You're even allowed to make a kli out of it if you do, theoretically, if you'd want to, because it is machal behema. So very good. We answered the kasha. Avidas chayv kayim. There's something which is machal behema is not asa to make a kli out of. The more is the kasha. Tani chada. We learned in one Brisa that you're allowed to cut this plant, whatever it is, in order to smell it. You should not, which we have the answer already. We know the answer. That if it's soft, then you're allowed to cut it. You're even allowed to cut it to make a kli out of it. And the other one says is because it's kashin and it's hard, it's not machal behema, and if you make a kli out of it, it'll be chayv chatas. So therefore, don't even cut it in order to smell it, because you might cut it to make a kli out of it. Yes.
It's the gay, let's say, with hadas or something. You're talking about the atzei.
If it's asay b'samim, also depends if it's soft or hard. If it's machal behema, if it's soft, and even if it's called asay b'samim, but it's soft in a way that an animal could eat it, so then it's not no issue of machal, no issue of making a kli out of it. Then there's no issue. You can make a kli, you can make a toothpick out of it. If it's machal behema. Machal behema, there's no issue of tikkun kli. But if it's hard in a way that an animal can't eat it, so it's not machal behema. So then, if you make a kli out of it, it will be a chiyuv chatas. And if you just did it to smell, it's not a chiyuv chatas. You didn't make a kli, but it's also mirabbanan because you might make a kli.
So what's our minute that we see that people, when they take a das in their hands, they'll squeeze it or whatever?
So what is that?
You want to make a bracha.
Yeah, so you want to smell it. So why is it mutter? So if it's machal behema, then it's 100% mutter.
Maybe a practical application of this halacha is that women.
This is a second. If you're squeezing something, to anything that's squeezable, like the leaves, like they're squeezing the leaves. But some they're not going to break. Did they break the stick? That's another question. They're breaking the stick after all, it's machal behema. But the leaves, that is machal behema. The leaves are soft. That's machal behema. So then it's mutter, and you're allowed to mololo. You're always allowed to be mololo. The question was kotmo. Mololo means to squeeze, to rub between your fingers. That's mutter. And kotmo is to break a piece off. Then that breaking a piece off depends if it's something which is machal behema. Machal behema is mutter. If it's machal behema, then it's also because you might make a kli out of it. Yes, Rav Manuel.
A practical application is with fruit like cantaloupes and things. People in the kitchen will often they will cut it out as a kli, and they will make the edges of it very nice looking. And here we see that it's not called a kli. You're allowed to do it. It's fine.
I don't know if you're talking about only the shell part. What do they do? The food itself is no problem. The food itself is no problem. You're not making a kli at all. But if you're talking about you could use that. You could take a cantaloupe and make that it should hold other fruit inside or something like that. No problem. But if you're going to only have the shell, the outer shell.
No, I'm talking about serving. I'm talking about serving it so it looks nice. Exactly what we just said. That should be mutter. No problem.
So there's no problem making clear machal adam. Even machal behem wouldn't be a problem. Okay, good. The Gemara is a kasha. Yes, please.
What's the problem with schita?
There's no schita on that. There's no schita.
How about lemon?
That's a juice. So then there's schita on that fruit. On fruit juice, there's a schita. On the leaves, they're bringing out just the fragrance of the leaves. It seems that there's no schita over there. Maybe it's a kasha. I don't know the answer, but it says that it's mutter. Maske flora vachas. What do we have? That's something which is hard in a way that it's not machal behema, and if you make a kli out of it, it's chayiv chatos with the raisa. So then you're not allowed to even break it for smelling because midrabanan. That was where you came out. That there's a deraisa, then there's a drabanan. Is that true? You're saying that it's usher to break someone which is hard just to smell. So we said the reason is because if you do it to make it clear, it'll be the raisa, so then even the smell, we're going to make exer rabbanan. So he wants to challenge that. He wants to challenge and so that even if you do it for a clear, it'll be the raisa, but if you're doing it in order to smell, he wants it to be mutter l'chadchila. So he says, I'll bring a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Masechah Shabbos that a person is allowed to break a barrel in order to get the grogros out of it. A barrel doesn't mean all kinds of wooden barrels. We think of a barrel, we think of this huge thing. Whatever it was, a kind of a kli. So they had it filled in with dried figs. So you're allowed to break it open in order to get the grogros out. As long as you don't do it in a way that it should become a kli. You're not doing it in order to make the kli good. Rashi says there's a kind of lid that's cemented on, and you can take it off as long as you break it open, as long as you don't want to make a kli. What's the Gemara's kasha? Even if you would make it for a kli, it will be chayiv. It sounds like over here, if you would make kavanasis kli, it will be chayiv, it will be yesod deraisa. But we allow you to do it in a way that you're not making a kli. So the same way, there's no gzei rabbanan in between. There's a chiyuv and there's a mutter. That if you're doing it for a kli, then it's chayiv. If you're doing it for other purposes, just want to get the food out, then it's permissible. So too over here, even it's true that if you would carve out this thing for a toothpick, it'll be chayiv. But if you're doing it now just to smell, there shouldn't be a drabanan. There shouldn't be a drabanan. Before the Gemara spoke about is it a chayiv or not. The Gemara said depends if it's hard. Now we're going in the case where it's hard. I'm saying that it is chayiv if you make it into a kli. But he's asking, he's challenging. There shouldn't be a drabanan on that. You're saying that with drabanan, you're not allowed to even do it for smelling it, and that's what I was asking. You see that they don't make such a gzei rabbanan.
According to this Manda Amar, isn't it still a davar she'eino miskaven?
I'm not following. What do you mean to say?
His whole.
Rashi says these words here. These words. Rashi says that you're not. Rashi says you're not doing it in a way that it's going to. Don't make it nice. Don't do it in a way that it's going to be a kli. Just break
right,
it,
but the difference is mutter or pater al aser. If it's actually a davar she'eino miskaven, but the actual totzah is the same or the action is the same, then if it would be a davar she'eino miskaven, it might be pater al aser.
A davar she'eino miskaven is mutter. Here it's not. Here it's mutter because you're not even doing. You're not getting that result. You're not getting the same result. Don't make it in a way that it should be a kli. Just break it open. if you would make it for a kli, it would be chayiv, not do that shevis kavan. Here you're doing it in a way that it's not becoming a kli. So that the Gemara is asking that if you're doing it this kind of ketima, you're doing it to make a toothpick, that's a certain way of doing it. And if you do that, it'll be chayiv. But now you're doing it just to break it open in order to smell it. So it should be permissible because there's no gzera. It doesn't have to do with Dav Shemis Kavan over here. First of all, Dav Shemis Kavan is mutter. And the Gemara is asking that you're not doing the same thing. And you see there's no gzera rabbanon in between. There's a chayiv. If you made it clear, it's chayiv. If you just did it in order to break it open, in order to get the smell, or here you want to get the contents out, so it's permissible. So there should be no gzera rabbanon. That was a kasha from a Mishnah, and also a kasha from an Amora. Rava bar Rav Ada, Ravin bar Rav Ada, Damit Avayu, Kevin Rav Yehuda, have a mafshach v'yavlon alusa afagav dechazia lekatata denagi b'chatzini. It seems like two brothers, Rava bar Rav Ada and Ravin bar Rav Ada. They said, both of them said, when we were in the ship of Yehuda, he used to break 4 pieces of a branch. Of course, it wasn't connected to the ground; it was very tolish. He had some kind of a branch, and he would break off big pieces. Rashi says it means like even clubs. The word alus is like a club. Probably it's an exaggeration, but it means there was a big piece of the branch that he would give us to smell. There was some kind of fragrant wood, but the branch was still roy. The branch that he broke off was that he's giving to smell was roy to be a handle of an axe or a hoe. So it means that it's a kli. It means he didn't intend to make a kli because he only intended that he should smell it. Even though it could be used for a handle of a kli, he didn't make it into a kli. So you see that it's mutter. So if one kasha was the Mishnah says that it's mutter, one kasha was that Rav Yehuda says that it's mutter. So how could you say that there's an Isser Rabbanan to cut a piece of wood which is fragrant smelling? If it's hard and it's not machal behema, this was a big branch over here. This branch of Rav Yehuda wasn't something that the animals could have eaten. And still you see that as long as you did it just for fragrance, it's mutter. Why are you saying there's also a Rabbanan? So the Gemara says, Lo kasha, Rabbanan. It's machlokes. Machlokes really goes back. If you make a kli out of it, is it going to be Asa Daraisa? It means everybody's going to agree that if there's Asa Daraisa in a certain way, there is going to be Asa Rabbanan to do it in a different way. That the Gemara is not giving into. The Gemara is just going to say it's machlokes. If you did it for a kli, is it Daraisa or not? We assume that if you made it for a kli, a piece of wood that you cut in order to make it into a kli, you cut it by hand, whatever. You did it in a way that you're carving it out to make it into a toothpick, so it will be Daraisa. And therefore, the Gemara is talking about if you did it only to smell the fragrance, is it going to be mutter or the Asam Rabbanan? Now the Gemara is saying that it's not so simple that even if you made it for a kli, you didn't do it with a knife. Rashi says you're not making this with a knife; you're just carving it out with your hands or something like that. Would that be chayiv or not? So the Gemara is going to say, depending on that, if it's chayiv or not, is going to be the next question. If you didn't do it for that purpose, is it going to be Asam Rabbanan? It goes very simply that if it's chayiv, if you made it for a kli, then it's going to be Asam Rabbanan, even if you're doing it to smell. But if it's only Rabbanan, if you did it for a kli, then it's going to even be mutter if you did it for a kli. So now the Gemara is going to say that everything we said till now on this page, that when it's kashin and did it for a kli, then it's going to be chayiv. That's only one sheet. That's Rabbi Lezer. But the Rabbanan, they hold that even if you did it for a kli, it's also only going to be Rabbanan. Rashi says because it's called tikkun kalach yad. I'm not doing it the regular way. I'm not doing a knife to carve it out. I just did it by hand. So even if you made it for a kli, it's only Rabbanan. So therefore, I'm not going to make Isser Rabbanan on doing it for a fragrance. Lo kasha har b'las Rabbanan. The Tanya of Rice. We didn't have this in the Mishnah. This is the same as our Mishnah. Rabbi Lezer says you can just bend down and pick up a twig on Yontif to use from your house. Or in the Chotzer Rashi says, in order to use it as a toothpick, fine, that's not asagya. Only go to the animal's feeding trough over there. Over there, it's animal food that you're allowed to use. Don't go to the floor. That's muksa. Okay, that was not asagya. That was a Mishnah. But now, back to our subject. Everybody agrees that this thing you pick up from the floor, don't break it. Don't break it. Don't cut it into a shape of a toothpick. And if you did, it's even chayiv chatas. Im kot malachas boshina from the ftoch badelas b'shogeg b'shabbos chayiv chatas b'meiz b'yontav sofek arba'am. Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer said that if you would cut the piece of wood into a toothpick, even by your hands, not the regular way, it's going to be as Issa Daraisa. And he says b'shogeg is chayiv chatas, b'meiz is anyantiv will be chayiv malchus. It's just saying, it means to say that as the Raisa, and Shabbos shogeg is chayiv chatas, b'meiz is chayiv skila, anyantiv b'meiz is chayiv malchus. And a kisser, it's the Raisa. Rabbi Lezer says if you take a piece of wood, a splinter of wood, whatever, a twig, and you cut it with your hands to make a toothpick, it's chayiv chatas. And therefore, he's going to hold that you're not allowed to break it even to smell, because exeri, you might come to break it as a kli, which is going to be the Raisa. But the Chachamim say that even if you do it for a Kli, it wouldn't be the Raisa. Even Yeshabah, Shantif, everything's only Rabbanan. Because Rashi says you're doing it kalachayad, you're not doing it with your hand, therefore it's Rabbanan. So now the Gemara explains, based on that, you have a good machlokes if you're allowed to do it to smell. If you're allowed to hold that, it'd be chayiv chatas if you make a kli out of it to make a toothpick. So then to do it to smell is asam Rabbanan. Xeri, you might come to make a kli out of it. But the Rabbanan said that even if you make a kli out of it, it's only potter because you didn't do it by a knife, you just did it with your fingers. So then it's to make it to smell is even mutal lachatchila. So that's all it should come out to Shpas like the Rabbanan, that even if you would do it for a kli, even if you made it to be a toothpick, it's only asam Rabbanan, and therefore you're allowed to break it in order to smell it. So this kind of hadassim nowadays, it's going to come out that according to Rabbanan, you'd be allowed to. The case of hadassim, not before we spoke about, the Belaz was talking about hadassim, if you're going to just rub the leaves in between, that's surely mutter, according to everybody. But how about the stick itself? So it comes out, even if it's a hard stick that animals wouldn't be able to eat, like Avyuda used to do. He used to take a big stick, and break off a piece and smell it. That's mutter. Why? Because we hold that even if you make a toothpick out of it by hand, it wouldn't be the rice, only it would be Rabbanan. So one step removed. If you're doing it in order to smell, it's mutter l'chatchila. So nowadays, you're allowed to take these kinds of besanim, mint leaves, surely, and even hadassim branches and things that are mamish a branch. Once, of course, it's detached from the ground before it's Shabbos and Yantif, you ought to break it in order to make the smoke come out. We passed like a one, not like a Beleza. So we finished with the Mishnah. Sorry, Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda said that Rav Yehuda Damora, they used to break off branches, so we said it's okay because he holds that even if you do it to make it clear, it'll only be Rabbanan. It goes back to the Mishnah in Mesach Shabbos, Shabbat Mechavis. Over there, it's a Mishnah. We don't want to say the Mishnah is against Rabbi Lezer. But let's say Rabbi Lezer had the Tan Shabbat Mechavis Lachem and Grogos Vashes Gavanas is clean. Before, I would have thought, that the Gemara is saying, the Mishnah is against him. That the Mishnah means that it says that you're allowed to break it if you're not doing it in order to make it clean, and you're not goes there, you might make it clean. But now we're saying that according to Rabbi Lezer, if you break it in a way that would make it clean, even though you're not doing it the regular way, it also will be asim of the raisa, be chayiv chatas. So Rabbi Lezer shouldn't permit to break it. Not just to take out the grogos. He holds this. If you hold that as the raisa to make it clean, then it's Rabbanan to do it for a different purpose. So too, if it would be the raisa to break the kli open in a way that it's going to be nice, even if you didn't do it with a professional way, you did it by hand. Rabbi Lezer should hold that as also the raisa, and therefore we should make a Rabbanan on that you shouldn't be allowed to break it open to get the contents out. Over there, it's talking about mustaki. Mustaki is interesting nowadays. What mastic they call gum, right?
Yeah.
So Rashi more or less says that it's some kind of a glue, which maybe might be the same word. Rashi says he didn't know what this was, but somebody came from also interesting Rashi over here. He says here's Rashi. It's some kind of a sap of a tree that they say this word here should be FIR. This tree, fir, FIR tree, that the sap is resin. And it's very sticky, and you make a glue out of it, and you could repair a broken kalim. So over there, some kind of glue. So he's saying that the case we say that according to Rabbi Lezer, the Mishnah says in Mesach Shabbos that you're allowed to break the barrel open. It's not a regular barrel. It's kind of a barrel that in itself is already put together with glue. And therefore, Rashi says there's no chance you're going to make a kli out of it. Or Taisa says even if you made a kli, it's not going to be the raisa. Everyone agrees to the yesod. If it's the raisa, if you made a kli, then it's going to be a rabbanan. You're not allowed to do it for a different reason. But the case over there is that it's not a the raisa. That even if you would have broken the kli nicely, it wouldn't be the raisa, and therefore you're allowed to break it open in order to get the contents. This sugya, I don't have all the ramifications of this, but this word mustaki over here. We'll stop over here for today, and this sugya is the shorish of all the issues about opening up kalim, all the packages, which packages you're allowed to open up nowadays, which ones are considered that you might make it in a nice way to become a chayiv deraisa, and therefore you're allowed to do it and open the contents. Our sugya says that Shobar Adam Chavos, even though the Mishnah over there says you can break open the kli in order to get the contents out. But here it says only mustaki. Agmar is only going contra Belezer, contra Rabbanan, it should be mutter, we said. But it isn't so simple in the Rishonim, and this is, just remember, the sugya of mustaki is in Beitza, over here, daf 30, what is it, 32? 33 already? What's today's daf? 33b, and there's a sugya about mustaki over here that isn't so simple to open up any kind of kli. Sometimes it's going to be asa, because you might make a kli out of it. Okay? That's today's daf. That's Shikach, everybody. Thank you. Yes, Shikoyach, everybody.
But the duff is 30, the duff
Today-
room is 34.
Right, and we're that behind because of Rosh Hashanah. We got behind the day. We
Why
didn't
don't
catch up
just
yet.
grab a couple extra minutes tomorrow?
A couple extra minutes. So
You know, or take an extra 15, 20 minutes tomorrow.
it could be we should divide it into a couple of days. We have to finish by the Siyum. We should be finished. We should update it by the Siyum. Be'ez Hashem. I'll see if there comes. I'm looking for an easy daf. So I didn't find one, but Be'ez Hashem will get there.